Now, you spend a lot of time learning, and wouldn't it suck if you were learning things that just weren't true? And it's particularly important when you're studying communication and you're trying to influence people, because there are a lot of big myths. And today you're going to learn 3 of the big myths in communication so that you don't fall prey to them. We're really going to take the art of communication and see how it stacks up against the science of communication. All right, so number 1, we often hear that stories are more persuasive than data. So I went online, I went to check, okay, being a researcher, went and found that there was this big meta study, which is basically a summary of all the research ever done comparing stories and narrative against data. And what they found was that data was more persuasive than stories. I mean, hello world, this is something that everybody's got wrong, right? But there are some major exceptions. So for example, one of the main exceptions, of course, if you're making an empathic argument, save the children from starving, clearly when empathy is involved, we empathize more with narrative, so it's a lot more powerful than data. There are other instances where stories are superior to data, but in this information data-rich world of corporate culture today, it's no surprise for some people who haven't studied communication that data is more persuasive. And you still might be saying, well, wait a minute, Chris, isn't there a research statistic where 53% of people remember stories after hearing a pitch, whereas only 5% remember the data? And there is. And here's the thing, I love that storytellers use the statistics about stories and data to prove that stories are more persuasive than data. You get that? It's kind of a funky argument using data to support stories. What the research actually shows is that indeed stories are more memorable, but they are not necessarily more persuasive. In fact, most of the decisions we make in the moment, we make based on the data we're given in that moment. So whether or not we remember it's irrelevant. And decisions made based on data are more lasting than decisions made on story, right? Very important point. Now, if you're not making a decision in the moment, let's say that you're trying to convince somebody about a brand, like make a brand associations to some emotion, then stories may be your best bet. Because in those delayed activities where a decision is not being made in the moment and you have that memorable story holding with you, you can see that might be a benefit. But if you're going into your boss's office to convince him or her to change something in your company, or you want to pitch a product, data is the way to go. Stories will complement it and add another level, but they're not the source. All right, so myth number 1, guys, hello science, goodbye art. Myth number 2. Now there's this recent trend in the last few years that body language, actually this has been going for decades, body language and tone of voice are superior to the words you use. In fact, body language and tone of voice account for something like 92% of your influence. So I went and looked at the study. It's called the Moravian study. Guy, basically what he did is he researched when people talk, how we assess what they're really feeling and thinking. So let's say your spouse walks in, your partner walks in, and you say, how's your day? And they're like, fine, right? In that instance, what the research shows is you're looking at the way they present themselves and how they use the tone of voice, fine, to assess whether they actually mean what they're saying, right? So tone of voice and body language account for roughly 90% of the way we read people's thoughts and feelings. But that study has nothing to do with persuasion at all. In the office, nobody cares how you feel, right? They want to know, what are the facts of the situation? Is it true? Right? And is this going to be important to business? So that study does not apply to persuasion. It is so misquoted. I'm taking an online course right now by a master, professor from an Ivy League college, and he quoted the study wrong, or he quoted that, yeah, body language is superior. It's not. In fact, I'm just going to give you some other evidence. They did a big study to find out how corporate vision affects growth of new, small, medium companies, and they found that a company that has a vision grows about twice as fast as a company without a vision. And this was only true if the vision was communicated. But what's really interesting about this research is that it wasn't the executives' charisma or the way they presented it that mattered, had the impact on other people. It was the words they used. Yes, tone of voice and body language are important, but whether they're important more than words, and particularly in this ridiculous imbalance of 90%, that's all baloney. Nobody ever says Lincoln delivered the Gettysburg Address well, right? The words mattered. All right, so now you guys are thinking, oh my God, he's just broken 2 of the big myths of communication. Stories are not as strong as data. Words are important compared to body language. I mean, if you didn't study communication, you'd be like, whatever, these are just kind of sound obvious. But yes, this is what the science says. Number 3, we often think if we meet somebody and they have an opposite opinion of us, or opposite opinion than us, that a little more persuasion's gonna get them through their resistance. If we think when we go up to family or somebody who's got a different political opinion than us, somebody who wants to do something different in business, if they resist us, right, they have that opposite opinion, the more persuasive we make our argument, the more successful we'll be at convincing them. And I almost feel like this is like an absurd thing because I'm about to tell you that persuasion doesn't really work. You're like, what? But also but we already know this. Like, how many times have you tried to convince your parents about something and it didn't work at all? Again, the research. Study done at Ohio State University. And they wanted to find out, okay, if people resist your conclusion, what happens if you try to persuade them harder? So they basically asked students, hey, would you guys be up for random drug tests on campus? And guess what the students said? Students are like, guys, hell no. So psychologists then gave different arguments, like very minor persuasive arguments, major persuasive arguments, and then like super persuasive arguments. And the research found that the more persuasive the argument got, the more students were likely to resist random drug tests on campus, right? The conclusion was, when they've got resistance and you push on that resistance, they resist even more. So the myth here is that persuasion works on people who are resistant to you. But the truth is that resistance often gets accentuated and stronger when there's a persuasion argument is there. The way you want to overcome people's resistance is not through more persuasion, but through anti-resistance techniques. These are actually probably one of the golden gems that I write about in my new book coming out, How to Overcome Resistance So That You Can Persuade Them. But one of the easy things is, if you talk to your family member, you're trying to convince them about a political opinion, or you talk to, a colleague, trying to convince them of a different way to do things, the first thing you don't want to say is, hey, you're wrong, I'm right. Actually, one of the easiest ways to overcome somebody's resistance is just to start out by saying, oh, you wanted to vote for that political candidate for those reasons? I agree with you. They'd be like, oh, yeah. The minute you say I agree with you, their resistance starts to crumble. And then you have a little opportunity to actually persuade them in the opposite direction. All right, 3 myths, guys. Data. Better than stories. Words. Possibly better than body language. That's what the research suggests. And C, persuasion doesn't work on resistance. Craziness. Now, there are a lot of caveats all over the place, but these are the big things. Big takeaways, guys, so that when you walk into your boss's office, you can get that promotion, you can get a higher salary, you can convince them that your ideas are right, you can persuade and present better. All of that when you understand the truth and the science of communication. Hey guys, thanks for watching the video I just made for you. A lot more coming. Sign up through the link on my Facebook page. You get ways to save money, ways to grow your career through using the most persuasive word. A lot more coming, ways to just lift you up. So sign up and I will see you soon.